Welcome and thank you everyone for attending. I'm so happy to see all of you for this very special event. If you don't know me, my name is Mimi Peña and I'm the new president of Purchase College. Someone whose own background is a SUNY graduate. So I'm so proud to be part of Purchase College. I'm also a first generation college graduate, a native New Yorker. One of my neighborhoods was Hell's Kitchen and the daughter of Dominican parents. I'm so thrilled to be here this evening. As someone who attended also a liberal arts college, I believe strongly in the ability of the liberal arts to open up students' minds and create new possibilities and a lifelong love of learning. The Film and Media Studies program is just a perfect example of how engaging with the arts and liberal arts in one campus can help inspire students to find their voice through making, studying, writing, and critiquing film. This program is a tribute to the excellent educational opportunities offered at Purchase College, and another reason why I'm delighted to be here to witness our students' growth as scholars and artists. Today's panel brings some of our most illustrious film alumni together to reflect on the founding years of the Film and Media Studies program and its influence on their careers and choices. The Film and Media Studies program is an ideal example of Purchase's interdisciplinary approach. Since the years when Miriam Arsham arrived in 1973 and the mid-70s when Tom Gunning joined the faculty, the Film and Media Studies program has been an interdisciplinary mentoring arts conservatory program, weaving together a hands-on creative lab for the study of film with the study of aesthetics. All of the film students since the beginning must minor in cinema studies. Miriam Arsham and Tom Gunning provided the foundation and leadership for this approach. We're extremely grateful to them for providing this vision in the early years that still defines the program today. The vibrant 100-year-old Miriam Arsham, who's in the audience, is our honored guest for an important reason. In addition to her formative influence, two alumni, Chris Wedge, here today, and Hal Hartley, have started a scholarship in Miriam's honor to provide scholarship support for students in film. We thank you, Miriam, for all you've done for our students. Miriam Arsham has been is a highly respected documentary filmmaker since the 1940s when she worked as the assistant to Maya Deren. Her many films include Martha Graham, Dance on Film, the Academy Award-winning The Eleanor Roosevelt Story, The Guns of August, Yasha Heifetz's Masterclasses, and Night Journey, the film of Martha Graham's ballet. Thank you for joining us today. Tom Gunning will moderate this conversation. Tom is the author of two books, the films of Fritz Lang, Allegories of Vision and Modernity, and D.W. Griffith and the Origins of American Narrative Film, and hundreds of publications. He was one of the early professors of cinema studies at Purchase and is Distinguished Service Professor of Art History and Cinema and Media Studies at the University of Chicago. Gunning has concentrated on early cinema and the culture of modernity from which cinema arose throughout his career. We are very proud to have you with us to moderate the conversation. So without further ado, I'm eager to hear your reflections, and I'll pass it on to you, Tom.
Thank you so much, Millie, and great to meet you and welcome you to a true adventure. And hello and welcome to everyone. And while I wish we could all be together in one place and meet and greet each other, it's almost miraculous that this new medium can bring us all together technologically and allow us to celebrate the founding, the flourishing, and the future of this extraordinary program at Purchase in Film and Media. Teaching here, which I did for 15 years, it was one of the most amazing periods of my life. And I'm sure it was true for many, maybe even all of you that are listening in. The film program at Purchase was founded as an integral part of a state college dedicated to the arts, where film and the moving image could be taught and learned alongside the more traditional arts of painting and sculpture and dance and music and theater, while interacting with the sciences and the humanities, and close enough to New York City, but still a bit outside of the busy metropolis. From its beginning, the film program was nourished by the city's long relationship to film. The program's first chair, important to mention, Willard Van Dyke, was one of the founders of the American documentary film, and he brought with him to Purchase when he first came artists who had helped craft that movement. The New York independent film culture was the mother, I would say, of the Purchase program, with roots not only in documentary, but in experimental film, animation, and the independent narrative film. It was this sense of independence, I think, that really defined our program, seeking ways that the medium of film could not only serve to entertain, although that's true, but to explore both the world and the nature of film itself. When I arrived soon after the founding of the department, I encountered people who were part of the history of film that I had been studying. Prime among them was Miriam Arsham, Mimi Arsham, who had collaborated with the founders of American avant-garde film, Maya Deren and Sasha Hamid, as well as with Willard and the documentary filmmakers. Now, it's often been said by me, among other people, that film editing provides the heartbeat of a film. And Mimi taught generations of Purchase students how to give films that pulse. Two of her former students who took Mimi's path as a professional editor, Academy Award winner Tom Cross, and the former head of our Purchase program, Iris Cahn, are with us today. I don't know if Iris is actually back heading again. I know she comes in and out. And I believe that Drew Buckland, another editor and Academy Award winner, is online. And maybe there are others too. There are many. Her progenies are everywhere. They will all agree, I think, that Mimi not only taught them how to give films a heartbeat, but that she was the heart and soul of our program for many years. The program at Purchase believed in training the total filmmaker. So although people often ended up practicing a specific craft, here they learned them all, and also had the responsibility for putting a film of their own together. And I should add, I believe that no one is as totally a filmmaker as an animator who creates not only the pulse of the film, but its very motion and life. And I'm proud to have here as well a powerhouse animator and Purchase alum, Chris Wedge, the auteur of Ice Age. I have such warm memories of my time with Mimi and Iris as colleagues, and these two gentlemen as my students who fulfilled the promise that they showed in classes. They also represent many others who've moved through this program to become directors, script writers, camera persons, costume designers, lighting technicians, and even film scholars and film programmers, and other things as well. So what we want to do here is I want to spend some time with all of us together, remembering and celebrating the process by which we learn and are taught. Places like this, people like these who made it happen. Throughout this process, please send questions through chat as they occur to you. Towards the end, we'll read a number of those, as many as we can, and try to answer them. So I've mentioned their names already, but I want to spend a minute introducing each of our panelists. Chris Wedge, who, as I mentioned, is an animator and who I will always remember having a corner of his own in the soundstage where he worked on his films and where his dog sat next to him for years and years. Chris has been an amazing person extending from his early visions, and in many ways I found his students in the films that he did here as a student as delightful as anything I've ever seen, and as proud of those early works as of his later works. Then Tom Cross, who won the Academy Award for Whiplash, but also has done, I think it's editing for La La Land and The Hostiles and The World's Greatest Showman and other films, extraordinary. I am so proud to have been a teacher of both of them, and I often brag on that fact. And then also Iris Cahn, who is alumni from the years. She was here before I was. And then after I was here for a while, we lured her back, partly to teach some of Mimi's classes when Mimi was on leave, or when she needed another voice, and who got many students here, and who at one point armed into being the chair, for which she probably has never, and who is herself an and professional editor very much in that school. So having just briefly mentioned all of you, I guess let's pile in and begin talking about our experiences. I know Tom Cross has asked for the audience generally that one question that you might think about and respond to is who is now your most significant filmmaker? Who is it that is you're most excited by, and things like that? So we'll maybe get into that. We can respond to that, of course, in chat. And as I say, we'll be doing that, towards the end here. So, are there any things that before I begin launching a few questions that the three of you would like to particularly say, and particularly say in relation to Mimi Arsham?
Hi, Mimi. Well, it's Tom. Thank you for summing up Purchase so eloquently. You know, when I entered, I was 18 years old from upstate New York. I didn't know nothing about the New York independent art film scene, and I wasn't sure I understood what I was in for. And looking back on those days, I think what Purchase did for me was just prepare me to think. It didn't really, it wasn't a stark producing program. It didn't tell you like whose job was what out there, and it didn't give you kind of a recipe for how to make a career, but it gave you a compass. So like they put a compass in your pocket, so that wherever you found yourself, you had, I think, confidence in your own voice as a filmmaker. I think that's what I ended up with. And I have to say, behind there all the time has been Mimi. And for me, part of it was, I mean, at that age, I was kind of terrified of Mimi. I mean, she had so much experience. There was so much she was bringing to it. And when she saw our newfangled flatbed editing thing, she said, well, we had to do it with uprights. This is what we had to do. I felt diminished. I felt as though I hadn't lived, the film life I was supposed to have had. But I don't know. I don't know. Somebody else should talk. I'm just going to ramble. But it was foundational, that's for sure. My 6 years of undergrad at SUNY Purchase Film Department.
Chris, this is I should pick up here because you made me think I think you made me think of my 6 years of undergrad at Purchase. I guess both of us, we loved it so much we just couldn't leave, so when I Tom, when you mentioned the goal of Purchase to help nurture and create the total filmmaker, that's what I wanted to be when I went to Purchase. And I really responded to what I saw as the two big pillars or cornerstones of the program, which was kind of the intellectual film theory and the aesthetics, but also the lab aspect, the mechanics, the hands-on experience of making movies. And, I think for me, we have those, literally those two cornerstones with us, Tom, you, and on one side of it. And when I say one side, shaking hands with the other side of it, which is for me, Mimi Arsham, because, Mimi, I didn't know it at the time, but Mimi really showed me that I wanted to be an editor. Mimi taught me the mechanics. She taught me how to use a splicer, which when I think about it, I think about how profound that is. That's almost like teaching me how to talk or teaching me how to walk. But then along with those mechanics, you know, along with the discipline that she taught with, there was also passion, and there was also, you know, empathy. Mimi was an incredibly tough professor, and like Chris said, you know, I, like many students, were afraid, we're intimidated. You know, Mimi is kind of small in stature, but you know, the thing we all knew was how brilliant her mind was and how powerful she was. So that was extremely intimidating to go into her class. So, you know, when I would hang on her every word in every lesson. And, you know, when I did something right, if she liked something I did, I mean, that fed something in me. It planted seeds in me that inspired me. And again, you know, helped push me out of the nest into what I do now. So I'm indebted to Purchase, but I'm extremely indebted to Mimi Arsham. I mean, above, I think, all else. But I will also say, Tom, that, you know, something I think is really important for anyone who loves movies, anyone who wants to go in and make movies. For me, it's about, a lot of it is about film literacy, you know. And I remember going to Purchase, not really loving movies, but really not, you know, being very experienced in terms of the movies that were on my diet, so to speak. And so, you know, when I went to Purchase, you know, I would hang on your every syllabus and your every class to learn about, you know, Godard and Hitchcock and Ozu and Kurosawa and Brakhage and Chantal Ackerman, et cetera, et cetera. And I will say that film literacy and that interest in filmmakers has changed my life, because I was able to connect with filmmakers in New York, but also in Los Angeles, filmmakers like Damien Chazelle, who I'm very lucky to collaborate with. And, you know, we talk the same language because we both love the same movies, love a lot of the same filmmakers. And in fact, Damien Chazelle and I often talk about things that Tom Gunning has written and that we've both read. And so, you know, I can't say it any more clearly except to say that film literacy that you helped spark in me, that interest, changed my life. So.
I'm blushing. I have to intervene for just one thing here from Mimi. Since both you and Chris indicated that instead of just 4 years, you spent 6 years at Purchase. And I always will remember in senior seminar, the exit program, one time hearing Mimi say to all the students, kind of berating them, the way she would, you know, get to work, what are you doing? And she says, you don't know the opportunity you have here. When you're in the industry, there's always someone who wants to fire you, who wants to see you get fired. Here, nobody can fire you. And one of you, I don't know remember who it was, said, yeah, but it's worse. You want to graduate us. and you know, that kind of possibility. Also, as you say, Mimi's small stature, but great impact. One of our great chairmen, Aaron Mavakian, who was a burly guy, I remember him saying at one point, when Mimi gets wound up, I get out of the way. Iris, I know you know Mimi more than maybe anyone other than their direct family. And I'm really interested to hear your sense here.
You know, it's just wonderful seeing everybody. Mimi remembers you all. The interesting thing is sometimes now she'll say, well, I can't think of the film they made. But you know, we're talking about 40, 50 years ago. But I have an image. And I think what we all are feeling and Tom actually was my advisor for my graduate school work. So he's kind of been my teacher also. And I think what we're feeling here is the strength, the power that having a great teacher can do for you, because they don't tell you what to do. They, with Mimi, I remember, and I still find myself talking to students, and I noticed there's some current day students here today, and the students today are terrific. They're motivated. They want to change the world with what they do. Mimi would say, well, yeah, but what do you want to say? What's your intent? She would always say to me, there's no editing technique per se. There's no magic everything formula. It's you figure out what you're trying to say, and then you find the language that particular film, that weird combination of dailies you've been given or you've given yourself. And that is still, we've gone from Super 8 to Avid, and that is still what all our students are doing. And the things that I bet you everybody on this funny rectangle sheet can think of one thing that Mimi told them that they still use today. A breath is 1/3 of a second, or it's not the word, sometimes it's the silence that talks, or all these things that I know you know and use. And they, Mimi just had a way, yeah, she was, I didn't find her that scary because she's right, I could see eye to eye, I'm sure. But she was very truthful. Mimi values the truth. And that can be scary when you're 18, I mean, I don't know about you, but I was hiding a lot of my time at Purchase. So we owe Mimi this one, and I'm looking around and I see people with Harrison, I see all these people who edit, and they might not have had Mimi. I think I came in right at this wonderful class that was Ilya Chaikin and Tom and all sorts of people, and Drew were kind of that in the midst of that. And some of you may not have had Mimi, but you've had her teaching, because she was so clear on not just the technical organization, but the process of finding the film. So yeah, we owe her, just the most important thing Mimi ever told me was, you have to look at the footage. You just have to look and look. So, you'd be surprised when you're 19 how you want to just zip right through. But so yes, we love the people who got us here, the people who got Purchase to where we are.
So often I heard from former students, Mimi said things that really made me angry. I really disagreed. And then at one point I went, oh, that's what she meant. That in fact, the lessons often that we are most amazed by and find most useful take a while to sink in. That they at the moment that we first hear them, we actually resist them. And Mimi is so amazing because of the extent of history. Chris's story about the uprights and the flatbeds. And then I remember when she was transferring to digital, and she was taking a lesson, at whatever age she was, and learned how to do it. And I said, what do you think of it, Mimi? And she said, well, in many ways, it's wonderful. There are many things that it makes much easier. But basically, she said, I have to say, it's like, look, Ma, no hands. And there was this way that she really made people think about getting their hand in, and whether or not that would be technically true. That sense of physical immersion, emotional, physical, intellectual, the whole shebang. That's really what I think she taught. Yeah. Something I might just want to ask you, Chris, because it's something that I always remember when you were working, because you were a sweet guy, and you participated in my class. And as you got deeper and deeper into your film, going frame by frame and being in that corner of the soundstage for, I think, all night sometimes, there was a point where I said to Dick Rogers, who was the chair then, I'm a little worried about Chris. He seems kind of withdrawn. And he looked at me and said, he's just becoming an animator. And I'm just curious about how you're feeling of being an animator at Purchase. There were a number, but there weren't a lot. What that was like, because you really had to make your own way, often creating your own equipment and figuring out your own methods. So I'm curious to hear you talk a little bit about that.
Well, it's true. Thank you, Tom. It's true that I was finding my own way there, but I didn't have any lack of self-confidence, because what I saw at Purchase was the film program was brand new when I started.
Yeah.
When I came in for my interview, somebody said, I think I interviewed with Dick, and I showed him my little Super 8 high school movie with the cassette in sync. And he said, and they're endowing the film department with $1 million worth of film equipment. And I thought, yeah, great. And they about all the stuff. I think when you're a teenager, all the teenagers I talk to these days when I'm in talks, all they want to know about is how you did stuff. I think kids are just really interested in how to, and that's kind of where I was on a lot of this. I just saw the opportunity, and Dick was a great support. And he would, Dick, understanding that we didn't have a lot of animation curriculum, he brought people in to talk to me. He brought Susan Pitt in to spend a day with me and then give a presentation at night. But she spent the whole day with me looking at my, when I was starting my movie. I'm sorry to say that I may not have had as much experience or exposure to Mimi as a lot of you people, because I was making my movie, a frame at a time, and I only had so many shots to cut together. And I guess that's the order you're putting them in. Yep. You could drop a frame here maybe, or lose that shot, but I don't know. I can't remember too much criticism of what I was doing. I don't know, but it was a fantastic experience. Like I said before, the freedom to do what you wanted to do, the freedom to just continue feeling like you didn't realize that, when you're a kid playing in the dirt, you're an auteur. When you say, let's play this game, or these are the rules for this game, or you be this, you don't realize you're doing that. And then as you step into the world, it's just like, that's just what you do, and you don't put up with less. And I think one thing that occurred to me, the point that people were saying about things that, the wisdom that Mimi would give you at the ripe age of 20 or 19, it just doesn't hit you because you haven't been through it. And it's, I think the times that you learn it is when you've had to go through it yourself. And someplace back there, oh yeah. Well, now I know for sure. I won't trip over that one again, or I'll look out for it at least.
Something that this makes me think of that, I know Iris, I think, is in a different class, but both of you, although I'm not sure, Tom, maybe I've got this wrong, but the fact that Purchase was a state university and brought in, there were certainly students who were, New Yorkers and streetwise, but a lot of them came from upstate and had, it was kind of a whole new environment to be in an artistic world. I think that was true with you, Tom, although I could be wrong. One of the reasons I think it is because one of my strongest memories of you is that you were the sweetest guy. You were just extremely helpful and you were a terrific guy. So I began to think he must come from upstate, but I'm just curious about that type of experience for you.
Yeah, I grew up in Rochester, upstate, Rochester, New York, and
not necessarily a small town, but yeah.
No, but very far away from where I would end up in New York City and then in Los Angeles, where I am now. But my mom was an artist, mostly a painter. But my dad worked for the American Red Cross at the time. So even though my mom was an artist and would nurture my creativity, they were very far away from film as an art form. My dad is a movie lover, but I wouldn't call him a cinephile. And again, they were very far away from the film business. And but they very lovingly and nurtured my interest in movies. And I think my mom had a friend who had a son who went to Purchase. And so it was my mother who had the idea of me going to Purchase. I was just a kid who grew up in the suburbs who had no clue about college or anything. And somehow, you know, so I think if I remember correctly, my mother was the one who decided Purchase would be good. And we came up to visit. We came to see a play at the PAC, and we came to visit. And I think it was the only college that I applied to. And I had no concept of backup plans or anything like that. And I was just a kid from the suburbs who just kind of all of a sudden got dropped into Purchase. And you know, and something I'll say about the program and about the school, it's you know, I was very lucky to, you know, have a lot of great friends who were kind of like brothers and sisters to me, who kind of, you know, like my roommate was a kid I grew up with, Donnie Michaeli, who writes for SpongeBob SquarePants, and he's like a Emmy-nominated writer, you know, and my friend Philip Harrison and Stephen Altobello, like people, my classmates who are like my best buddies, and you know, we all kind of looked after each other. You know, they looked after me, and that's kind of a lot of my memories of going to Purchase have to do with these small, very conservatory classes. You know, 20 students, maybe a little bit less, and you know everyone in the department. You know, not just your class, but other classes, and you know, you kind of look out for each other. And sometimes you don't do it. It isn't all so romantic and gracious, you know. Sometimes, I mean, a lot of our classmates, you know, it wouldn't be. I don't know how to put it, but when I look back on it, I realize how much we kind of cared for each other, you know. And you know, that as a young kid who had no life experience, getting dropped into Purchase, that was pretty profound for me.
I think this is important because one of the things is that the classes were small, and that we had all of you for at least 4, if not 6 years. So, you know, it's amazing because I would, you know, when I think of, you know, our friend Hal Hartley, it was extraordinary. I mean, he was already, when he came into the program, a very, you know, brilliant and interesting guy. But when I would look at what he was doing when he first came and what he was doing after 4 or 5 years, you know, it was like, oh my God, I've watched something take shape. And it was true with all of you, and something which has not been true with all my educative experiences, not because of the students, but just because I'm not necessarily with them. With my graduate students, of course, I spent forever. But with undergraduates, I often would just have 1 class or 2 classes. And that was something that was wonderful at Purchase. And Iris, I just kind of, you were there at the beginning. You're still here. You've seen the whole arc. And I'm just curious if there's something in particular that strikes you of the shape of that change, or what remained the same. You know, what was that? What is the long haul of Purchase like?
Yeah, good question. But there's some students here now, and I think they would relate to what Tom's saying about people having your back, because you had to. You were all united in wanting to make this thing happen, this vision of your friends, so they'll help you. We're a unique school in that way. We don't have people that major in being a director or major in being, you know, a lighting person. So I think that's what's so remarkable about, I think, Tom and Chris, and I'm looking at all the people who are here. I can call, you know, any of the names. They are editor directors, and you know, they're writer directors. They give up being a director to help crew for each other, so they get to learn each aspect of filmmaking, and they get to think, well, what would happen if we changed the color of the light here, or what would happen if we you know, from a craft point of view, something that usually directors don't listen to out in the big world. You know, you don't really have the sound person coming up and saying, nah, don't do that in a oneer, you know. You know, so that is still happening. And to all the old, well, I'm the oldest graduate, but old graduates, students still shoot in 16mm in their fresh year. Why? Because it's amazingly frustrating. It's just so frustrating to have to load the camera and make sure there's no light leaks. And it's not endless digital life, you know, it's 3 minutes and it's costing you $100 and something bucks to shoot and develop. So you have to think before you shoot someplace. So there's a lot of continuity. What we do have that's wonderful. Okay, I think in the first 20 years when Mimi was teaching there were maybe 20 something women who graduated. That went up in the mid 90s. The next 10 years had maybe about 50 or 60. Now we're you know, we are women, hear us roar. And there are people that really understand what's going on in the world today and how it needs to be fixed, which is always there. So I guess that hasn't changed, but you'd be a little surprised that how much like, you know, class of 1975, 76, hi Doug, hi, Phil, who's from the, you know, people who are from the 80s and 90s, how much like your era Purchase has remained in those very true ways.
I might just mention, because again, you were a student here before my time, but I heard many stories, and that you being one of the few, if not sometimes the only woman in the program was, of course, meant, you know, you were extraordinary. And I remember that the kind of core of the film program often called themselves, I think they had it as an official group title, the Film Boys. And that, I don't know if you made it up or someone else, they then adopted a slogan that said, "You don't have to be a mister to be a film boy, sister." So yeah, and you did it. But yeah, it's extraordinary, that persistence, and that is one of the great changes that we can really celebrate. And the many ways, as you say, that people have contributed. In fact, I suddenly had a pang of guilt when I saw Michael Spiller's name up, thinking, oh, when I quickly went through some of the things people did, I didn't say sound and sound recorders, although he's done many things. But it is extraordinary. I think that what Purchase made you do was to think not just in isolation about the craft that you might particularly love, but to think about it as part of a whole. And that was almost in defiance of, say, the NYU model, where people really were slotted to go into one track or another. And I always remember at one point hearing Walter Murch talk of, you know, as one of the great editors and sound people, saying that he wanted every editor, every sound person to try to direct a movie. Not necessarily because of what they would learn, but what, you know, in terms of craft, but more how they would conceive of what they were doing from then on. So yeah, absolutely. Now I know we're kind of coming towards the end here, and we want to have time for questions and answers, as I say, possibly. But before we move on to that part, I just want to, of course, thank Mimi. This is about the whole program, but as we indicated, that program had a human, and it was in ways Mimi's. That she was just a wonderful colleague too. I mean, off of home from Purchase back to New York. I lived in Brooklyn. She lived in Manhattan. The conversations wonderful, and about so many things. I'll never forget. I just can't help but move this one in, even though it's not about film. Mimi was kind of a first generation American, and she grew up in Manhattan. And she told me that when she was growing up, she wanted to be 100% American. And that for her in her neighborhood meant speaking Sicilian. So extraordinary diversity that is part of our industry and part of our world. So I also just want to thank particularly Chris and Hal Hartley for this scholarship, which was mentioned, which is one of the occasions for this event, to announce it, to launch it, and how important that is, and that how important it is that it continues the work that Mimi and all of us have done, either as professionals or educators, but also as thinking about the people who are coming after us, the future, as well as the past. So I don't know if at this point Susan Benchel may want to give us an image of Mimi, just saying hello. So
Everybody's saying goodbye. They're saying hello.
saying hello and goodbye. So now I think as we mentioned, questions and answers. I'm going to look at the chat. I know a lot of the chat messages are among people, which might be interesting, but if there are, or now people may have some questions. Yes. Chris.
Tom, could I ask you a question?
Yes.
I have to say, some of my best memories of being in a classroom at Purchase was in the dark, in that amphitheater in the music building, and you sticking little pieces of paper into the take-up reel on the 16mm projector so you could go back and give us the lecture after the break. And actually, well, I met my wife Jean at Purchase, and for some reason we took your Hitchcock class together because it was an elective and other people could come in. And I just want to give you credit for getting a lot of narrative film structure in my head and understanding how things work. You pacing across, you would get into a zone, man, and you would just pace back and forth. It was like you were talking to yourself, and we were just watching a performance of you working this stuff out and getting your passion through. But it was in a Hitchcock, this is a question for you. It was in a Hitchcock class, and I can't remember what we watched. It might have been North by Northwest, and the famous last shot of the train going in the tunnel, of the whole thing building and then them being saved and then getting out of the movie as fast as possible. And you said, like, his story is building throughout, and it's getting closer and closer and closer until there's only one thing left. It's pointed at the end, like a turd. Did you say that?
I probably did plead guilty, because I have to admit, not only did I probably say it, it's really a quote.
Oh, it is a quote?
Not from Hitchcock, but actually from an artist, Claude Oldenburg, pop artist of the 60s. And he said at one point, I think art should be, what did he say? Tapered at both ends, like a turd.
Okay, maybe, okay.
Now we've maybe offended half our audience. I apologize if anybody is, but it's a good description of that sense of the way that, you know, you can say bring into closure, but this is a little more vivid. But I know
it was vivid, but you didn't stop pacing, and nobody said, huh? And maybe everyone knew, oh, that's Klaus Oldenburg, but blah, blah, blah.
I have been told sometimes, to my great embarrassment, about a number of things that I have said that if I'd been reflecting, I probably wouldn't have said. But
oh, don't be embarrassed. It stuck with me, and it's important.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. So let me see if in chat there are any questions. I've got a lot of highs.
Tom, you talked about the movie with Fry and the Statue of Liberty. I remember that scene in North.
In Sabotage.
We went over that.
Yeah, it's an extraordinary scene, and I have to actually say, I just wrote an essay which was published in Rome, or was supposed to be published in Rome, but the COVID thing may have delayed it. I've never seen it in print, but it was partly about that amazing scene of hanging on. It was an essay about how important hands are in Hitchcock, and of course there you've got not only his hand clinging, but he's clinging to an enormous hand. So yeah. Anyone want to respond to Tom's question about what filmmaker people are most excited about right now?
John Borman still, but I made a movie.
And John Borman, who was the other?
That's all.
Oh, I see. Okay.
I haven't paid attention to cinema in the past.
Right. Oh, interesting. Jonathan Caskell is saying Larry Cohen.
Oh, me too. You love Larry Cohen. I remember that was 77, let's say 78. I shouldn't date myself, but Iris knows this.
Right. Well, in fact, he made this kind of B horror film, God Told Me To, which I taught and I thought was extraordinary. And I remembered somebody saying, so you have an idea that it's worth teaching bad movies. So let me see, Jeffrey Schwartz, so amazing. Let me just see what you're saying here. Oh, I'm sorry, it disappeared. My relationship to question here. Unfortunately, I've got so many messages here that I have a hard time seeing them. Oh, Jeffrey Schwartz was asking about my perspective on films I've taught changed over the years. Surprisingly, there are a number of films that at one point I did not like that now I like very much. At one point I did not like Stanley Kubrick, and now he's one of my favorite directors, although I still don't like Clockwork Orange. But you know, I loved Eyes Wide Shut, which not everybody does. But many of the others are the films that I loved, and even like my favorite movie when I was 6 years old was John Ford's The Searchers. And it still probably is to such a degree that I named my first son Ethan after it. So, you know, it's been kind of consistent. Let me see here. When Cohen is telling me she agrees, but Eyes Wide Shut. Just see here. Oh, Chloe Zhao, Bob Goss names as one of his favorite filmmakers. Michael Worrell still talking about Ken Russell and Wendy Jo Cohen, David Cronenberg, who I always love too. Here's a question from Chris Ragazzo to Mimi. I don't know if we can convey this, but about whether she ever gave up on a student, or did you always see a potential? I don't know if that can be translated to her at this point, but okay, yeah. So seeing always a potential in students, or did you give up?
The question isn't clear. I'm sorry, Tom.
Okay, should I say it again?
Yeah.
Did you
rephrase it.
always, when you were teaching a student, were there ever students that you just gave up on, that they weren't ever going to get it, or did you always see potential?
Did you ever give up on a student? Of course. There you have it.
I was going to say that would be a tough one because no one would admit to it except for me. And I do in fact remember at one point maybe going, oh God, and I won't put the name. That blank blank. If I ever have to teach him again, I'm quitting. So let me see.
Question from Marco North.
Okay, very good. And what is the question? Because I can't, there's so many on the board.
To teach a class about narrative discourse again. The one you did with Bob Stein just set my head on fire. I'm curious how often you get to teach that way.
Well, that was a very unique situation and typical of Purchase. Bob Stein was a brilliant, and he died a couple years ago, teacher of literature. He was in the English department, but he taught a lot of, I sat in on his course on Chaucer and on his course on Dante's Divine Comedy. And he loved movies. And he said at one point, let's teach a course on narrative in both film and literature and see what happens. And I said, okay, but one thing, I want to teach some of the parts on literature and you've got to teach some of the parts on film. And so we made that crisscross, and I think it worked. Students were wonderful. They're really great. And one of the films that we taught in that course, because I see it as one of the great films about how films tell stories, and yet at the same time a very experimental film, was Celine and Julie Go Boating, French New Wave film, in which a story is kind of told and retold over and over. And I've often thought about the great film Flirt that Hal Hartley did, which does a similar type of thing. I mean, very different way. I'm not sure that he was thinking about Jacques Rivette's film Celine and Julie at that time, but it typified for me the way that I always felt, even though I was always interested in valuing films that didn't tell stories, whether they were pure spectacle or experimental films, exploring all the different ways that stories could be told was very important. And I was very gratified, Chris, saying that, one of the things he took from my classes was that sense of narrative form.
Tom, that was one of the most special things, and I think we understood that when we were there. I mean, I studied with Bob a lot, critical theory, and I mean, it was amazing. I want you to know, because you guys had us read A Gentle Creature, the Dostoevsky story, and we watched the Bresson film. Many, many, many years later, my daughter, I think she was 15, we watched the Bresson film first, but then she read the Dostoevsky, and we had a conversation I think you'd be very proud of. She actually read it even in English and in Russian, just to like go all the way.
Well, again, as I was saying, this is one of the things that Purchase made possible, was an interaction. I remember at one point when I was teaching a course in Eisenstein, and we were talking about his idea of overtonal montage. And I was saying, I know very little about music. And we were in the music building. And actually, I went out in the hall and grabbed one of the music teachers, and had him come in to talk about it. And then he said, does anyone have a musical instrument? And Una Marrero had a guitar in her locker. So she brought it in, and he had her play, and he demonstrated what the overtone was. And suddenly the whole idea of overtonal montage, which even though I thought I'd read carefully, was still kind of opaque to me, crystal clear. It was, and that was only because of the kind of, even the bad idea of the architecture that we never had our own building, but we're in the music building. And but that meant that, we passed people in the hall in a way that that if we'd had our own building, we might not have had. So that was one of the extraordinary things about this place. And I hope it's still true. Do you feel that's still there, Iris, that kind of exchange?
Definitely. Not the last few months, but yeah,
Sure.
actually, we put in protocols so that people could work together safely. So yeah, it's Purchase is very unique. I mean, I guess everybody who's graduated and they let them graduate feels that way about their college, but Purchase really is unique in the way it approaches teaching film, and film with dancers and actors and scientists and historians.
Very interesting. I have to mention looking at Dean Haspel, who combined, cinema and comic books, mentioning, Spring Break and, movies that one of the things, God told me to was an example, but Spring Breakers would be another, that we were able to explore not just the canonical masterpieces of cinema, but things that were on the edge. And I think one of the things that we also tried to do was, get people who loved films, who loved a variety of films, and who weren't just snobs. So let me see, we're moving towards the end here.
I'm sorry, Tom.
Yes.
You have to mention Griffith. We've been waiting the whole hour.
Well, it's hard to mention Griffith now, actually. To me, he's an extraordinarily great filmmaker, and my book is about how in 1908 to 1909, he, at a point, the film could have just disappeared. he made it into a narrative art, not single-handedly, but also very importantly. Of course, unfortunately, he was part of a racist culture, and he was most famous and most remembered now for a truly horrendously racist film. I feel we still can learn, and luckily he made films that weren't just that. It is tricky. But yeah, I will always defend him as a great filmmaker and always condemn him as a horrible example or a horrible product of the culture that he came out of. And you know, I've gone through his letters carefully, and it was very clear to me that when he looked at The Birth of a Nation, which is based on a racist book that's even worse than his film, he looked at it and said, I can make money on this, it'll be controversial. So, you know, what I think he wanted was not, you know, promote racism as much as make money. And of course, that's part of the, I know, curse of our industry, that a lot of very frightening things make a lot of money. But sometimes it also means that a lot of very tempestuous and controversial things come out. So can't say anything definitive, but that would be a
But
little.
thank you for showing that, because that was a big learning experience.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. Yeah, because I couldn't easily do it now unless we had a bomb shelter and a lot of time to talk, which we could. My colleague from Chicago, Jackie Stewart, who's now the one of the programmers of the new Academy Motion Picture Arts Museum, and who of course appears occasionally, or was appearing on Turner Classic Movies, I think it was. She, you know, we talked a lot. She was one of my students, and she does a course entirely on The Birth of a Nation, which for a African-American woman is both very brave and very critical, I should add.
Tom, we have a few questions from cinema studies students.
Okay, thank you. And can you field them, because I'm having trouble doing this with the chat. There's so many.
So Georgia Formas, as a cinema studies student and a massive Harmony Korine fan, I'm wondering how counterculture film movements have possibly inspired you in your teaching and all making.
Now, countercultural, it's a little hard what all that means, but you have to remember, I came to New York City at 18 after having been expelled by Ohio for having there, and I was in New York in the 60s, and that sense of a culture where cinema was really part of the culture. It's never left me, and in fact, I've often kind of regretted that their cinema doesn't have the same almost immediacy that I think it did then, which was not always just political. It was also sensual. It was about you know, getting to the movies and opening your eyes and opening your mind, and so it's been very important to me. But of course, it can mean many different things. And I think I maybe am supposed, because I have a cheat sheet here with the kind of times of what we're supposed to be doing things, and at this point I'm supposed to be doing closing remarks, and most of all, I just want to thank, most obviously, my panelists, most resoundingly Mimi, the people who organized this, both technically and who contacted all of us. But most of all, the great thing for me, even though, as I say, I wish I could meet and greet all of you, seeing all these people who have been hanging onto the new medium and joining us and making this a really important occasion. And then hopefully, as I say, it's a moment where we're remembering something, but where we're also starting and supporting something, and that we can all reflect on what we've learned and what we hope other people will take away from this experience. So very much the again the support of this new fund, I guess it is, the way to put it, scholarship fund that Hal and Chris have initiated. But then also just the sense of community right now that we're experiencing and witnessing on the screen in front of us. And, something that the organizer would particularly like to stress the importance of keeping involved with these kind of alumni events, keeping the spirit of them alive. And that's the main thing I want to say in closing, but I very much want to, at least, they did say to me, we could run a couple of minutes over. So if anyone has something, either another question or particularly more a comment, definitely the panelists, but also anybody else that's there, we've got a couple of minutes to where we can shoehorn it in. Anyone?
Hi, this is Jonathan George. Hi, everybody. Hey, Tom. I just have to bring up
who I did one of my best performances for.
And I was going to ask a question about that, but I won't. Since this is right at the end, we'll have other times for that. You early on, you talked about how part of the film department education was people did all different jobs. You weren't just an editor, just a director. But another essential piece of the whole purchase education for me was the I guess the fertilization of kind of, you had a narrative tradition, an experimental tradition, a documentary, and other traditions as well. But you weren't just one. They could all kind of really feed each other. And it was really, and Tom, you always brought out a great deal of kind of, a documentary aspect in a feature film, in a narrative film, and other ways around. And Willard brought that whole aspect of opera in documentary and that cross-fertilization. And that was a really important part, I thought, of the whole education. You could learn from this piece and that piece, and it was really great if there was an ambiguity in many cases. And I had to say that.
I think that's really important. It's funny, and I might just want to do a brief tribute to one of our chairs, one of our longest lasting chairs and professors, Dick Rogers, who was ambiguity personified. And, I often would say to him, the main thing that you teach all our students is never take any statement for surface meaning, and always look at the other side of it. The other thing I want to stress in what you said was, because, of course, Willard Van Dyke, who's extremely important here, was the founder of the program. That was part of the reason, the personal reason for the importance of documentary. But one of the great things was that that every student made a documentary at one point. I don't know if that's continued, but oh, good, great. And so even if you were going to do, animation about puppets, or experimental films about color, or a straight narrative, you had that experience of the documentary. And I remember at one point I won't quote her name here, but a very dramatic foreign student who was in the class at the end, when we had our year-end review, said, I got nothing out of the documentary course. And Dick got very angry and said, oh, come on, you got something out of the documentary course. She went, yes, you're right. I got that. I hate documentary. And I have to say that even with that, that's a learning experience. Okay, well.
Tom, I just want to speak up for avant-garde. Like, that's an important thing at Purchase that I think you brought to us, but John Rubin. Right? Yeah. That was just so mind expanding, the emphasis on experimental film. It was like as important as narrative and documentary. And I think it opened up our approach to all film, so even if we weren't making experimental films, it just opened up the way that we see cinema, and it was so important.
Iris,
Well, I just noticed that there is a very patient student, Jaleel, I think, wanted to ask a question.
Please. Yeah, please help me with that, because I can't quite, So go ahead.
Hey, Jaleel.
How you doing? Hi, Iris. How you doing? Hi, Tom. Hi, everybody. I just wanted to say, well, first of all, my name is Jaleel. I am current senior here at Purchase, about to graduate in a couple of weeks actually. So I just wanted to say, not really a question, but for real, just thank y'all so much for talking. Thank you so much for sharing your experience, being here at Purchase, being someone who loves filmmaking, who loves just the entertainment industry, just loves just entertaining and telling a story, is really inspiring. Hearing stories of like different Purchase alumni, different people who come from different walks of life, coming to this place and making something bigger than themselves. And I feel like at this program here is what we're really about. We collaborate with so many different people, and we connect with so many different people from for different majors, and we able to tell so many big stories that could impact so many different people. So hearing stories of how Iris and how Chris Wedge and how Tom Cross and how Michael Spiller and how all these great alumni, how Hartley came through the same wall that I'm walking through now. Me and my friends and my classmates are walking through. It really, and I mean this in the most sincere way, it really inspires me to really give all I got. Cause like, this is I know like, as your former professor says, this is a really great opportunity just to be on this campus, just to study film and to really make whatever comes to your mind into real life and to make a story that can really impact the world. So for that, and thank you for everything that the entire alumni on this call have done for the film program. And like, I'm just very proud to be a Purchase Panther with y'all. So thank you so much.
Terrific. I might just mention that always remember when I saw in a theater Hal Hartley's first feature, or it was even more his second, and suddenly going, not only is this a terrific film and wonderful to see him having achieved this, but everybody in it I recognized, you know, as a member of the acting class, a member of the filmmaking class, that, you know, there was just this amazing quality of a place, you know, that brought everything together. And you know, it's extraordinary. Again, please, if somebody is wanting, and if anyone can help relay this, we've got time for at least one more question, but we also can begin to move away if
I think Grace has a question for Chris.
Terrific.
So Chris, besides professors, bring in people to help mentor you in animation. How did you get into it yourself and find your own group of people to work with?
So Chris, yeah.
Okay, thank you, Grace. Look, you know, my story's a lot like Tom's. I grew up in upstate New York in a little town, and my dad built a house outside of town. So I mean, I think that's how I got into animation. I spent summers by myself in the basement making little movies. I just got into it because it was something that I could do by myself. That may not be the whole thing, but I think that the people that I've been privileged to have worked with over the years are just people that kind of joined in as I went and as we went. You know, I think that if there's anything to take from your undergraduate experiences, that this is where, like Mimi said at one point, this is all you. You know, nobody's gonna fire you here. This is your thing. This is a place for you to find your voice, and so that you know how it feels. Once you make a film, I promise you, once you finish your senior film, you know how that feels for the rest of your life. I mean, the next one, or 20 years down the road, might take 3 years to make after like 15 years of trying to get it on its feet. Yep. But you will know when you're at the beginning. You'll know when you're struggling with the middle of it. You'll know when it's over. You know, you'll know where you put all your life into it, and off it goes. It's just, I think, what I'm trying to say is those people will come to you. I didn't go out and try to find people. It just kind of all happens. Just keep your mind on what you want to do. Keep your mind on your work. And I don't know, somehow at Jeffrey Rush's line in Shakespeare in Love, I always, you know, what's going to happen? Oh my God, it's not going to work. The play can't go on. He goes, how are we going to do this? And he says, I don't know. It always just works out. And that's kind of what happens. That was my experience anyway.
And Chris, I just want to, to your point, expanding on your point too, I think of all of my friends and people I know who went to Purchase and what they're doing and all the different things they're doing. And I really had no idea what anyone was going to be doing. So the seeds that were planted at Purchase, the work that people did at Purchase, I remember responding to, but you just never know what those seeds are going to grow into, and very different, people have traveled to all sorts of different places. It sounds like I'm starting to do a Dr. Seuss thing or something, but it's like I think about all the amazing things we talked about, all these conversations about film that I had with friends and my peers, and talking about documentary and experimental film, and Pennebaker and Bruce Conner and all this stuff, and these same people that I would have these conversations about these very specific things, in some cases experimental things. These are people doing things I never imagined they would do, or working on big Hollywood productions and stuff. But people are doing all kinds of different types of film work, and it's really exciting. But if I were to go back and look, I wouldn't have thought that, not because I didn't think people were going to go and have success, but it's just a reminder that a place like Purchase, a place that planted all these amazing seeds with me, it's one stop in this lifelong journey, and I don't think any single place is a silver bullet, for anything, but it is one important stop on this whole arc, this whole story arc that each person has, and you don't know where it's going to go, and that's like amazing, but it's a great place to start.
I see that Kathleen Craig has given us the kind of exact quote from the Shakespeare in Love, "It's a mystery," which is, I might just close with, at one point, Mimi and Dick and a few other people, a number of students too, including Jonathan George, the long rides back to New York from Purchase were often where classes continued and insights were made. I would often argue with Dick because it was so fun to argue with him. And I said at one point, Dick, I'm not sure, this is early on, that our students are old enough to benefit. I'm not sure they shouldn't be graduate students. They shouldn't have already a BA before they come to this program. And he said, I know what you mean. He said, but they will all have an experience at, many of them teenagers still, that will transform them, of being thrust into a situation where they're responsible. And, for actors, for getting the drinks there, for, seeing whether the, location will be available. He said, even if they make terrible films, they will have had this extraordinary experience. And he said, and it's probably richer than any BA could be. And everything I learned after then at Purchase showed the truth of that. Even though a number of students, actually came here after they had a BA, and a number of them took, in fact, I remember Hal Hartley taking at least a year off to kind of get an education, not just learn how to make films, and take courses with Bob Stein in particular. Anyway, this is probably where we should end. It's 5:15 Chicago time, 6:15 Purchase time. And again, hard to express how, I thought this would be nice, but I had no idea this would be so, educational and heartwarming. And thank you so much, my friends. And I'm not sure how we end it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. And Chris and Iris, and nice to meet you, Tom Cross.
Thank you.
See you all.
Thank
Tom,
you, Mimi.
Iris.
Do this again.
Chris.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Mimi.
You.
Great
Thank
meeting
you,
all.
Mimi.
Thank you. See See you soon.
Bye. Take
Bye,
care,
Mimi.
everybody.
Thank you all.
Be safe. Stay healthy.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Everyone. Thank you, Mimi.
Bye-bye.
Much love.
Bye, Mimi. Goodbye.
And it just fades away.
It's just like everybody else.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye, everybody from Mexico.
Bye from Brooklyn.
Bye from Moscow.
Oh my God, of course, I know
Buy
that.
from purchase.
Bye from California.
Ah,
Great seeing everybody.
yep.
Bye.